So welcome to Chapter 9. We're going to be talking about game components and how we can access them on some very specific game objects Unity allows us to create, such as particle systems and UI elements. This chapter is going to really be focused on specific examples, so we're not really going to have slides. I will show us some outside resources that will further explain some of the game objects I'll be talking about. So without further ado, why don't we get into some particle systems so we can create explosions whenever we destroy asteroids, or when our player is destroyed, or even when bullets collide with our asteroids. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to look at our collision script that we've been working on. And I'm just going to double click that and open up MonDevelop. Right now our collision script's pretty basic. It's really functional. It's really versatile. We can attach it to any game object, and depending on the stats of that game object, we can just say if it's destroyed or if it's or just take away some of its health or shields, whatever our case may be. This is something we've already covered. Why don't we add a little bit more functionality though with it and get it to instantiate a particle system explosion. So I'm just going to jump into it and you guys can follow along. The first example I'm going to show is how we can get our asteroid to explode. And to keep in the theme of keeping our collision class as generic and versatile as possible, why don't we just create some vague functionality here so we can apply it to multiple different scenarios. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new public variable at the top here. Let's go public, and we're going to do a new type of variable here, and we're going to call this particle system, and we're just going to call it explosion. Generic stuff. Alright, this will allow us to assign in any type of the particle systems that I have included inside of this chapter's assets package. We can assign any of these explosions to our collision script, and remember how our collision script, it does different things depending on what game object we have it applied to. So we'll be able to make an asteroid explosion a little bit different than the player explosion. Alright, so now that I've got this public variable declared right here, why don't we go ahead and write the code that makes our particle system start exploding. And we're going to do an instantiate in this case. There's a lot of different ways in which we can do this kind of function or this kind of mechanic, but why don't we just go with the most basic, most straightforward, and we're just going to instantiate our explosion. So we'll write instantiate, and then there's a few different parameters here we got to do. First, we need to tell it what we want to instantiate, and that's going to be our explosion we defined up here. And then we want to put a comma, and now we need to add two more values here. We need to put a position value and a rotation value. So why don't we just match whatever game object the collision script is actually attached to by just writing simply game object. And Unity will try to auto-correct that, so you can either press escape to get rid of that or go back and just lowercase that g. Very important, you don't want a capital case G, you want a lowercase there. And let's access the transform component, more specifically the position parameter of that transform component. And we'll do another comma here, and our last value we want to put is game object, and I'm going to press escape on the keyboard to get rid of that auto format, and we're going to do transform again, and more specifically dot rotation, and we'll just boom, leave it like that. Let's see, did I misspell rotation or something? Why is this pink? Let me go in and see what's going on here. Transform dot rotation. Alright, that should work. Let's see if we get any error messages here. Game object does not exist in our current context. And syntax strikes its rears its ugly head again. That O should have been capitalized right there. Great. I love building in those syntax errors into our lectures. Keeps us, you know, on our toes about how we can misspell stuff and it break our code. Anyway, so now that I got the basic code written into my collision script right here, how can we start using this? Well, I press Control S to save it, and it looks like all my error messages are gone. So let's go to my prefabs folder and let's go to my asteroid. And we have all these components over here that we've already worked with, such as our collider, our rigid body, Here's our custom component right here with our mover script, and we have our values right there. Here's our stat script that all of our objects have, and now we have come to our collision script, and we have a new public variable that has nothing attached to it, and it's asking for a particle system. So why don't we go and just single click our VFX folder down here, and let's pull explosion A. I'm going to left click, hold it, drag it, and just assign it right here into my explosion public game public particle system variable that we defined in our code. So let's press play and see what happens. So I'm going to fire a missile, and boom, we're getting an explosion. And my missiles seem to be freaking out a little bit. I'm going to restart that. Our missiles seem to be acting up. What's going on here? And that's because somehow its trigger wasn't checked. So I'm going to go back and redo that. There we go. That's perfect. What was happening there was my capsule collider was not checked as this trigger. So it was treating the collider as a physical bounding box, such as when you were moving in a first-person controller. If we wanted to add a physical barrier to a wall, we would leave this blank. But since this trigger handles our collision, we want to make sure that's checked. I just want to make sure that all my triggers are like that, just to update it. Okay. So a few things I want to note right here that are going on. Boom. There's a few things we need to clean up here. It looks like it works in our game view, but we're seeing some weird things going on right now. Alright. So I'm going to pause it, and I want to point out a few things in my scene view. You see these little weird, triangle thing with the shuriken looking things? Well, in Unity, our particle system creator is called shuriken, and these little icons here denote a particle emitter. Alright? So what's going on here is when we instantiate our particle emitter, we don't really have anything to get rid of them after they play their one little explosion burst. So we have all of our particles hanging around. Also, our play area is right here in view, and whenever we press unpause this, we're going to see our asteroids explode like right here. And that might be confusing to the player because they're like, okay, I'm not shooting those down, why are those exploding? So why don't we just do the easiest fix first and just pull our play area back. So now when our asteroids go off screen, we're not seeing them in our game view, but we can see them explode over here. Another thing that's going on is we have these error messages popping up in our console here. Well, that's because whenever we created our collision script, remember, it's applied to all of our prefabs here. And if we look at our missile collision script right here, we don't have an explosion assigned to that. So that's why we're getting this little error here. Part of your assignment this week will be to fix this error and get all of your explosions assigned to the correct prefabs here. Once you assign an explosion prefab to this explosion public particle system variable, this error system will go away. And the last thing we need to do is look at our hierarchy now. With our game pause, we have all these icons here. We have all these explosion A's. Explosion A is our particle system. So let's just do a real quick fix. And the easiest way to fix this is we're going to create a new script. And we're going to call this destroy after time. And this is going to be a really easy, simple script. Basically, it's going to destroy any game object after a certain set of time after they've been created or after they've been instantiated. So it's really easy. We're just going to create a public float variable. Destroy delay is what we're going to call it. And in our void start, let's do a destroy. What do we want to destroy? We want to destroy the game object. And then we're going to do a comma. Now we need to set a value for how long after our destroy is called is the object actually destroyed. That's where our destroy delay comes in handy. And why don't we just clean up this extra code? We don't need it. And there we go. So what we're going to do now is let's go to my VFX folder, highlight my explosion A because that was what was littering my hierarchy up right here. And you can see I have my particle system parameters set right here. You might have played around with them at the beginning of the semester, but I'm just going to hide it for right now. I'm going to add component, and I can either drag and drop the script on here, but I'm just going to go to add component, scripts, destroy after time, and let's say after 2 seconds my particle system is just going to go away. So when we press play here, look at my scene view here. See how all of my particle systems are going away. And I've run out of missile bullets here. This time look at the hierarchy here. We have explosion A, and now they're just being destroyed after 2 seconds. And now it's our game scene's not being littered with all these particle systems. And there we go. Alright, so your first mission this week is to set up explosions for all of our prefabs here. All of our prefabs have the potential of being destroyed when they collide with something. Obviously, we've seen our asteroids collide with our bullets, and that's what destroys them. But also our asteroids can collide with our player. Alright. What happens when my player is destroyed? You know what? I'm going to select my player real quick and set his health down a little bit so we can see my player be destroyed. Let's just say he has a health of 10. So we have my asteroids creating explosions, but here we have that error. Our player is destroyed, but we don't have a explosion variable set to him. Oh, and guess what? We tweaked our play area when the game was paused. Anytime you do a tweak, whenever you have a game paused, I want to show you this. So we pause our game, we move our play field back. Look what happens after we get out of the play. Our play field goes back to where it was. So make sure whenever you're adjusting your objects in your game scene, you're not paused, because all of your work will be reverted back to its original state. So that's why I had to readjust my play area right there. Alright, so like I said, we want to add explosions to all of my prefabs here. And get creative. We have a bunch of different particle effects here. If you want to preview what the particle effect does, all you gotta do is just drag and drop it into our view here. And I can select my medium fighter and uncheck it so we can hide it a little bit. And we have this particle effect guy right here. If I press simulate, we can see what my particle effect, we get a good preview. So if we go to explosion D, so I can see it in the scene view here, and the way I have my game tab set up here. I can just drag and drop it and dock it next to here. I can see the same particle effect in both screens. Alright, so you're going to assign particle explosions to all of your prefabs here. And remember, since we have that generic collision script, that versatile collision script, we already have our collision asking for an explosion in all of our prefabs here, because we already had our collision script attached to our prefabs. Alright, so that's explosions. Why don't we add something else? You know what, before we do that, I want to show you guys a cool little thing that you might be interested in. I'm going to bring up the Unity website here, and here we have about an hour and 15
I created a new one
tutorial
to illustrate the effect
guy going through our particle system. So if you ever wanted to know more about particle systems and create maybe some of your own explosions and everything, you guys can peruse through this tutorial, and it'll show you how to create all kinds of things and what all these different components do.
Right? Something like that.
So how do we get to that? Well,
let's
see. Let me pause this. If we go to Unity tutorials, right on the main page, let's see, maybe go to Learn. We're at unity3d.com. We go to Learn. We go to Tutorials. And I think it's under Live Training. And from here, I'm just going to go to that search button and type in particles, or particle. And no, that's not the way what I wanted to do. I know it's in here somewhere. There we go, particle systems. Right there. And that's how we can get to this live training tutorial that Unity has with us. You know, it would have been redundant
Hello
if I would
everybody, my name
made a
is
video
Mike.
that just goes over the exact same thing this guy's going over. So I'm just going to point you to this right here. This little tool or tutorial right here will answer most of your questions if you want to use your own custom particle systems. But I've included your own sets of particles right here, a bunch of different ones that'll get you started in this chapter. You know, something's been bothering me since day one. It's probably been bothering you. Oh, my medium fighter's still deactivated. Let me activate that. I don't know about you, but the last time I saw outer space, it wasn't a nice neutral blue color. Why don't we fix that? Why don't we actually add a nice little play background or a play area environment for our scene here? I'm going to get rid of this random weapon hit. Alright, so I've included a pretty cool little particle system for you guys right here. This is called the star field. Alright, if I select the star field, well, we don't have our little preview button here. Well, if we select some of the objects nested under star field, we can kind of see what's going on here. And you're going to have to tweak your star field so it lines up nicely with our game view, because right now we have stars that are really, they're coming at us from the background to the foreground. That's not the way our game's set up. So why don't we reset the transform values here, and I'm just going to rotate it up 90 degrees, or I could just do it 90 degrees. And then, does that fix it? Let's see. Well, that's pretty cool. Now we just have stars flying at our field of view here, but that's still not the kind of orientation I want. So I'm going to make sure that's selected. Now I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees in the Y. Let's see what happens here. Oh, that's looking a little bit better. Now the stars are flying with the asteroids. Now I just need to position it. And how am I going to position it? I don't see any particles here. Why don't we select one of the components here and pause it in our particle effect previewer buttons right here. Now when I select star field, I can kind of get a visual representation of where my particles are being emitted from. And so my particles don't clip through my plane. Why don't I bring it back just a little bit? And now I have stars in the background, and now we kind of get a sense that we're flying through space a little bit. But we're not quite there. Why don't I select my main camera here and go to background, and let's set it to pitch black. And look at there. Now we're actually flying through outer space, all because of particle systems. Nice. It's actually starting to look like a game now, isn't it? With explosions and all kinds of error messages. Wait, we don't want those error messages. But remember, you guys can fix that by assigning explosions to all of your different prefabs. Alright, let's do one more thing. Let's set up a simple UI that tells the player how much health they have. Because before that, now we've been trying to rely on just looking at the inspector as we press play. Guess what? Whenever we publish our game to make millions of dollars, our player's not going to have our inspector sitting next to it, and they're not going to know how much health we have. See the value right there, how it changes? We need to get this value right here somehow drawn onto our screen, and I'm going to show you guys that right now. Before we get into that, I'm going to show you another little some more tools or tutorials on the Unity website here. I'm going to walk us through exactly what we need to do, but remember, if we go to unity3d.com, go to learn, we can go to tutorials, and if we go down here, we have a UI section, and we have a 12 beginner videos showing you everything you can do with the new UI system in Unity. You guys are lucky that you've only gotten to Unity now, because with 4.6, the version you guys should be using now, we now have the ability to actually make our UI visually instead of coding it in like we were making a website. Before, all of our UI elements had to be hard coded in scripts. Now we can actually drag and drop our text and little background images and see it working inside of our scene view with us. So that may not make much sense if you really haven't messed with the UI before. Doesn't matter. Just follow along with me now, and we're going to quickly go over some of the UI stuff inside of Unity. Alright, I'm going to clear some stuff out here. And let me just basically get into a neutral state inside of my game. Everything's clean. Alright, I'm going to create a new game object, empty game object, and reset its values here under the transform component. And I want to just call this UI. This is basically going to house all of my UI game objects here. Alright, great. First thing we're going to do is, you ever see this little 2D icon up here? We're going to press it. And what that does is it snaps everything into a 2D isometric view. Alright? Notice how everything is 2D within our game now. Doesn't really affect our game scene, but when we're editing it, it'll be useful for our UI. The next thing we're going to do is, with my UI selected, I'm going to right click on it, and there's a UI menu right here, and we have all these different options here. Before you can create any kind of UI system, you first need to create a canvas. The canvas is the bedrock of any UI you have within your scene. And since we press the 2D button, we get a nice little front-on view of our canvas here. If I didn't have it in 2D, look what we got. We have my little ship here and this huge UI rectangle here. So if I press 2D, now we're flat on with it. Basically, we're going to make a HUD. So why don't I click this canvas and call it HUD canvas. Alright, so a few things to consider with the canvas here. You'll notice up in here with these new things, you know, we're familiar with our move and rotate and scale. We now have a rect transform tool that'll be very important with our UI stuff. Notice how it brings up these little blue guys right here. And since this is a canvas, we really can't adjust the diameters of our, or the not diameters, but our dimensions of our UI right now. That's because if you look over in our inspector here, render mode is going to be very important here. We have three options. The first one is screen space overlay. This basically will overlay all of your UI elements directly to your screen, like if you were just playing any kind of regular old video game with a heads-up display with your health and your ammo. Basically the kind of UI HUD system that you've all been accustomed to. You can even specify which camera with screen space camera, and then assigning what camera, render camera you want to do. You can even do it that way. For our HUD right now, let's just leave it to overlay. And in world space, if you watch the tutorials, you'll figure out why world space is kind of neat too. But we're just going to keep it simple, and we're going to keep it with screen space overlay. Alright. Another way I kind of like to work with our canvas scaler, we have constant pixel size or scale with screen size. I like to set it to scale with screen size because whenever you're working inside of Unity, see how our screen size right here is shrinking and getting bigger, shrinking and getting bigger. For right now, for this purposes, we're just going to scale with screen size. Let me get rid of these error messages. Alright, so now that we got our canvas made, we're good to go. And notice how our position X, Y, Z, wait a minute, these don't look like a normal transform stuff, but we have position. Well, if I select world space, I can set the position on that stuff. But if I do this, well, that's because our position and our width and height of our canvas we see right here is going to be determined by the width and height of our screen resolution. There we go. So why don't we just quit talking about the canvas and get into maybe making a background for our health bar or our health text. So I'm going to click on my UI again, or actually I'm going to click on HUD canvas, and I'm going to nest the next game object under HUD canvas. I'm going to go to UI again and select image right there, and just keep in mind that you can also go to game object, go to UI, and do image that way. So I'm doing the basic same thing here. And this is going to be my stats background. So why don't I call this stats background? And since it's an image, I'll go ahead and name it image after that. And now you'll see that we have this big white square on our screen here. I'm going to do a quick little overview of what's going on here. The tutorials I showed you earlier will give a better explanation. I'm going to breeze through this real quick. We have two different sets of adjustable position notifications or icons or whatever. The little guy I'm swinging around right now is called our anchors right here. and we can see our anchors described right here. Our anchors determine basically the values of my rect transform. Remember, we're in rect transform. And why don't you go ahead and make sure you're on pivot too. If you don't have it on pivot, you can adjust this little circular guy right here. So I'll get to the pivot in a second. I want you guys to notice something. I can snap my blue dots right here where actually describe the actual dimension of my white box here, my background. And I can snap them to my anchors here. Basically, our anchors describe how our image scales with screen size. And how here I can grab the canvas outline right here, and I can stretch it and squash it and mimic to maybe a resolution is like on an old TV from the 80s and it's more square. Notice how our relationship between our blue dots right here to our anchors determine how our image scales whenever our screen size scales. There's a lot of cool things you can do here. We have a preset system in our rect transform. This basically are anchor presets. So if we wanted to snap our image to the top of the screen, we can use a preset here that gets all my anchor points right to the middle of our screen here. And whenever I stretch the canvas to mimic our screen resolution changing, maybe it's super widescreen monitor that somebody has, notice how my background image keeps kind of in relation with my anchor here. What if I wanted to only have it scale when it's squashed and keep the same width? Well, I can go to this preset here, and we have stretch presets here, and notice how my anchor points right up here. Well, if you ever lose what's going on here, that's because you just need to select your image that you just created. So now whenever I position my background here, it'll scale whenever my screen shrinks in height, but it'll always keep the same width. But in this instance, I always want my HUD to remain the same size, and I always want it anchored to the bottom left of my screen here. So with my background image selected, I'm going to go to presets here, and notice how this little anchor preset here snaps it to the corner. Now whenever I stretch my screen right here, I'm always going to have my background right there. And I think that's a little too big. And here you can see it's nice to have your game view up in the next screen so you can get a real-time preview of what your audience has seen. And I want to show you guys something. If I change the aspects under my game tab up here, remember that square? Look what happened here. That's our CRTV right here, of the old like 90s and 80s TVs. How everything was, 5.4, almost like a square resolution. And there's my canvas changing. Notice how my background here will stay the same. Alright, so a big white block. That's kind of gross looking. I just want you guys to know that you can change your source image right here as none of the sprite. So if you wanted to go to textures and I don't have a background here. Well, let me find a background image real quick. So I'm just going to go and bring up a web browser, and why don't we Google background panel or something like that. Let me go to images. None of this is looking. Ooh, that one looks pretty cool. Let's be more specific. Panel PNG sprite, maybe something like that. Not finding anything there. So I did a little digging and I Google searched for background box PNG, and this was kind of the first thing that showed up. View image, and here we have a nice little PNG, and I'm just going to drag and drop this to my desktop, and then I can do something cool here. Normally I have two monitors, so I'm not having to readjust everything. I'm going to go and drop this in textures. Here we have a background gray. And to get it to play nicely with the UI system, I'm going to set this to Sprite 2D. Hit apply. Alright. And let's see. Do I need to make a material next? I'm going to create... No, I don't need to create a material. So don't do that. I'm going to select my background image up here in my hierarchy. Navigate to my textures. And I'm going to drag and drop this gray box right there. And now instead of a garish big white thing, we have that nice little box image with the rounded corners. We just attached a texture to my image right here. And I can even adjust its opacity by clicking on the color box and adjusting its alpha channel right here. So why don't we set its alpha down a little bit. I'm swinging this down right here. And now we have a cool little transparent box that we can start throwing our UI on there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to throw a UI text object on here. And why don't we call this text object health text. Alright, so wait, where is it? Well, there we go. There's our new text. This is what's going to display our health of the player. So I'm just going to drag and drop it, position it. Remember, we're in rect tool right here. And now with my health text box selected, why don't I do like an example health 100. That way I can get an idea of how big I want my font. You can drop down any kind of font that you can download from maybe defont.com. So if I go back to defont.com, this is one of my favorite font websites. There's so many. Let's make it like a Celtic, or maybe since it's a spaceship game, here we have a bunch of sci-fi things right here. Ooh, Star Jedi. That looks familiar. From Boba Fonts. The puns are too powerful here. So I'm just going to click and download this. And now I have these guys right here. And you're looking for this icon right here. True Top Font File. That's been my downloads. Again, I'm going to show you guys how we can take something like right here. That's actually a font thing, font package that you can install inside of Windows. Well, Unity's cool. I'm going to take this and I'll just drag and drop it down into assets for right now. So I've loaded this Star Wars ripoff font. I'm going to select my health text game object right here. Look, I'm just going to drag and drop it. And whoa, what's going on? That's crazy looking. Health. Does it not have numbers in it? I might have, yeah. So I didn't get the best. I didn't get the best font. Apparently, in this font, numbers give you these weird borders or whatever. So you know what? Let's quickly just get another one. That was crazy. Star Jedi. And to avoid that mistake on defont.com, you can actually do a custom preview here. So I can do health 100 and do a submit. Alright, so that was weird. So I've already got it downloaded. Maybe I just picked up the wrong one. Star Jedi. Maybe that's what I needed. I had logo right there. Having to shift through all this stuff. So I'm going to just drag and drop it. Okay, I can't do that. I'm going to drag and drop this Star J-hole. Maybe get both of them. Okay, I want to do the thick one, the outlined thick one. So let's bring up my Unity window. And one of these are what I want to use. Again, I'm going to select my health text. And is this what I wanted? Let's do health 100. No, that's the bad one again. Star Jedi. There we go. And now I have a really cool font. And I can adjust its font size. Make it a little bit smaller. And I kind of like to make my dimensions kind of match up with my image here. Make sure it's resting comfortably inside my image. And you can go back to your image and resize it if you want it to fit your text a little bit. See how we're basically, it's almost like Photoshop, right? We're just adjusting images, and we're not having to code dimensions or find the screen size or anything like that. The one thing I also want to note, the order in your hierarchy depends on or it describes what gets drawn in front of what. So if I go to my background again and up my alpha, now I can't see my text. But if I position my text right under image, basically this gets drawn on top. So image gets drawn, and then health gets, or the text gets drawn. All right, and then we have some just basic auto formatting stuff right here. No big deal. All right, cool. I can even change the color, I guess. Why don't I change it to kind of a green, health, or maybe red, because health is always red, right? I don't know. Health. Now I have a Star Wars font on a nice little background. Why don't I go back and go back to my image game object, set my opacity down a little bit. Now that health is really popping right here. Alright, so we've been playing around. It's all well and good. And you know what? If you're going to do fonts like that, maybe you should make a folder called fonts that Unity can hold, and you can put your fonts into there. I'm a neat freak like that. Alright, so let's wrap it up. I don't want this video is already kind of getting longer than I want it to. All we got to do now is make some scripts. Alright? Because we need a script to update our health. Because right now, our health is stuck at just generic 100. Because that's what I've written right here. We need a script to adjust and update our text box right here. Alright, you know what? I'm actually going to go back to my player now and bump his health back up to 100. And let's create a new script, new C# script, and let's call this HUD. Alright, let's open it up in my develop, and let's get to coding here. Let's see. We're not going to need a start function, so let's get rid of that. I know updates called once a frame. I'm in chapter 9. I don't need to know that, Unity. I've already done 8 chapters of this stuff. Alright, so let's just do it step by step. First, we need to create some public game object variables. So public, capital G, game object. And what do I need to make? Well, I need to be able to access 2 different things right now. I need to be able to access, or 2 different game objects. I need to be able to get at this health text game object right here, because remember, this little text component is what I want to change. And it just so happens I need to get at my medium fighter, because it has the stats component right here, and guess what? That's where that variable is housed, on the stats component of medium fighter. So I need to create some game object variables to get at those things. So let's call the first one health text, and since this is an object, we want to call it that, and not public. We want to do public, and I've just done it again. That's what happens whenever you talk and type at the same time. And why don't we just call this player object. Alright, awesome. And now if I press Control S, I haven't attached the script to anything yet, so I'm going to take my HUD script and just drag and drop it onto my HUD canvas up at the top here. And now you can see under canvas and the scalar, remember these values we were adjusting earlier, now I have my own component I just rolled up. And I'm going to drag and drop this health text onto my health text object. And why don't we drag and drop my medium fighter on the player object. It's all about getting at this text component and getting at my stats component to get to my health. Alright, these 2 things right here will help us update my health text right here. Alright, so let's bring up our code again. What we want to do, we need to create some local variables so we can get at the exact variables that we need to start dealing with here. Remember, we need to create those local variables to point directly at health right here. So why don't we do that? We're going to do that by saying stats, because remember, we want to get at my stats component. So we're typecasting this new local variable as type stats. See, it's that component we rolled. We're doing our own type of variable here. So we want to do stats, and we want to give it a name. So let's say player health, and right there is the new name of our local variable that we're going to be getting and accessing. Right now we're basically declaring and initializing our player health local variable inside of update. And now we need to do all this big old line of code. What object is stats on? Well, we've already described it as our player object. So let's say player object, and then we want to do a get component, because remember we want to get at the stat script right here. And what component do we want to get at? Well, we want to do stats. And parentheses, because why not? Let's just do a parentheses. Actually, that's important, but I won't get into it now. I think it's able to somehow, maybe that's the way you access functions within this component here. But I digress. Alright, so now we have a local variable with player health. So now we can always see how many health points our player has. We need to do another type of operation like this right here. We need to make a local variable for our health text object. So let me break this down. If I select my health text object right here, notice how we have text right here, because within our text component right here, we need to get at the text variable. Think of this box right here as the same thing as this box for our health on our player. So we need to treat it the same way. Alright. So let's say text, because we're trying to get at our text component. And let's not texture, be careful of that auto format. And let's say call it health text. We're not going to call it health text object. This is the actual health text that we want to start accessing here. And now we use our health text object, because this is the game object that our text script is sitting on right here. Alright, so health text object dot get component. We want to get at that text, and there we go. So now we have two local variables, not texture. Alright, we have two local variables that work for us right here. What the heck? This is pink. Well, so we don't end up with a compiler error. Why don't we go ahead and I'll show you the compiler error we'll get. We get text could not be found. Are you missing something? A directive or an assembly reference? Well, we haven't done anything like this yet, but it's a simple line of code. We need to go to the very top using, what do we need to put there? Unity engine .ui. This will allow us to access different functions within the UI class inside of Unity. Now our text is blue and everybody's happy here. So what about the actual updating of our code here? Well, let's just make sure everything's rocking really well. See, we have these warnings. Okay, we've created these local variables, but nothing's assigned to them and they're never used. We're getting to that. Just hold your horses, Unity. Alright. So now we actually need to do the code that will update our text constantly. So why don't we say health text dot text, and I've just totally misspelled health text dot text, and this is basically a debug.log, guys, except for debug.log we're accessing the .text component here. And remember those quotations? Now we're in orange, and we'll say something like health. We're actually going to write out our health right here, and we're going to close that off. Remember the plus sign whenever we want to combine variables that change, dynamic variables that change for our debug.log. And we're going to do a plus. And now we have a player health local variable that we need to call dot health. Remember, we want to get at the exact health thing. And then we're going to do something crazy here. Since health was a float variable, let me just pull up my stats script right here. So health is a float right here, but yet we're trying to do a debug.log or a .text string operation. Well, why don't we just do something magical and do a toString call right here, and that'll convert that float to string, because that's what Unity wants to see when we're working with .text. Remember that orange quotation marks? It's that debug.log. We're looking for an actual string to print. So that'll just change our player health found right here. It'll turn it from a float to a string, which is basically text. We'll hit Control S to save. And now we're playing our game. It doesn't look like anything's changed. But boom, we're updating. And you can see here, now we actually have a professional looking UI. And we've ripped Star Wars off. And George Lucas is weeping because, you know, his last movie he did, the animation sucked anyway. Whoa, crazy. Now we're getting all these error messages because our UI is looking for the player, but it's been destroyed. We're just going to ignore that because our game, if we were doing a full-fledged game, a game over screen would have come up and we wouldn't be trying to access any code anymore. But that, my friends, is how you access all these different variables such as health, and how you get at our script or our text box right here. And now we got something cool. We actually have a little UI on our game scene. Boom, 95 health. God, this is a game now. We've made a game. You know what would be kind of cool too? It'd be awesome to be able to see our ammo. You know what? That's for you to figure out. And it's going to be pretty easy. It's basically the same thing as our health. I've already shown you how we can access our stats and get them updated in our code here. So why don't you guys figure out how to do a player ammo and a ammo text box. So you're going to need to create a new text. You can obviously just copy and paste this health text right here and call it ammo text. And I want to see an ammo count right here. I want to see you guys have a star field going on with a black background. And I want to see explosions for these bullets hitting the asteroid. I think I actually have a player or a weapon hit explosion that you can use. I want to see explosions for when missiles collide with something. I want to see a big explosion for whenever a laser, orbital laser. Let me restart this so we can see my laser a little bit better. I want to see my laser coming in from nowhere, hitting our stuff. And of course, I want a huge explosion for whenever our player finally bites the bucket here. And I'll get some more asteroids spawned. We're at 5 health. The next one should do us. That's so anticlimactic for when our player dies. So that's your mission for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this stuff, because this is actually putting that spit shine on our game and making it look all professional. And then after this lesson's done, you should be able to make a really cool game, and you'll be on your way to start the final project. You'll be making your own very own first space shooter game. You'll be able to amaze and astound all your other friends that, you know, maybe play games. You can be like, hey, guess what? I make games now. And you'll also, I guess, pass the class. But that's secondary to the glory from your friends. Anyway, so if you guys have any questions, just email me and I'll get back to you. But you guys seem to be doing pretty good in the class so far. So if I hear anything from you, I'll be disappointed that I've taught y'all very badly. You haven't learned much. Just kidding. Don't feel pressure. Please email me if you have any problems. And we're almost done, guys. You've been great. Keep chugging and keep the faith.